you're going from like not knowing the industry, and then you got to, have a crash course.
Honestly, it was every form of research you could do, I did. I was Googling, I was on Instagram, I was searching hashtags, I was searching accounts, I was diving, like I would see a post and I would click on all of these different accounts and see all of these different things and contents they're creating and kind of how they were running their businesses. My husband was researching things on the back end as far as like taxes and, like, because we got a loan through the SBA, so all of that kind of stuff we did together. So we were learning not only the wedding industry, but business and entrepreneurship all at the same time.
You're listening to the Venue RX podcast.
What's up, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX, and I am excited for another episode on our venue owner series. This has been an awesome series where we have got to talk to venue owners in different areas all across the country and hear their process around starting their venues and just kind of what the day-to-day looks like, and just peeling back some of those layers, understanding what is it really like to own a venue and what does the day-to-day look like and what are some of the experiences and processes that they had as they started their venue. And so I am really thrilled to be joined today by Nikole, joining me from Oklahoma. How are you, Nikole?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing really, really well. I didn't say this in the beginning, but this podcast is all about documenting and sharing best practices around owning, operating, managing, all of the things, right? For really world-class wedding venues. And, I'm passionate about bringing information to people, to venue owners, to people in our industry to help, them run their businesses better and, have better work-life balance, whatever that looks like. And thank you so much for being here. Can you tell me the name of your venue. Let's kind of start with an origin story because I love a good origin story, but tell me the name of your venue and let's start digging in.
Okay, yes, and thank you for having us. I'll say that too. We are so excited to do this. So again, my name's Nikole. I own Still Meadows Wedding and Event Venue in a tiny town called Macomb, Oklahoma. We are like a barn exterior with outdoor spaces, and then we have an inside reception hall. Our origin story is probably a little bit different. We did not build the venue from the ground up. This wasn't a idea or a thing that we kind of like manifested years and it took to kind of form where we're at. This was kind of a fell into our laps kind of situation. We taken us back. I worked a corporate job for a really long time, and then we had our second kiddo.
Do you mind sharing what that was in?
So it was human resources. It was a payroll software company.
Oh, amazing. Okay,
yeah.
Perfect.
I was the team leader of this pretty big company here in Oklahoma, and I loved it. I learned a lot from it. I attribute a lot of my business practices to how they run their business, but I had a second kid. And so we were like, okay, let's weigh financially, like it's better to just stay home with the kids than spend so much in daycare. And so I made that transition to stay home. And that was in COVID, 2020 was when my second son was born. So I started staying home. My husband was working. He was working for a car dealership. He had been in the car industry on the mechanical side for 15 years, his whole career. So he was doing that. And we've always kind of wanted to own our business. That was always a conversation that we had. We wanted to be our own bosses. We wanted to make our own money, all of these kinds of things. And so when I was staying home, I was getting to that comfortable point where my son was about a year old. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to do something. Like I'm done being a stay-at-home mom. He's getting a little bit older. Like what's the new adventure, right? So one day I just started looking on, basically it's kind of like a Zillow for businesses here in Oklahoma. It sounds kind of funny, but it's like businesses for sale, right? And a lot of them were like nail salons or liquor stores or car washes, or some of those things that you see pretty frequently. And I stumbled upon this wedding venue and I was like, what? This could be something kind of cool. Like my mom is a travel agent, so she's always booked honeymoons. And my sister at the time really liked to do makeup. I was like, maybe she could be a makeup artist. And like, this is something we could do together, get some property. And, we kind of just spun all these ideas off of each other. And so then the more we researched it, we were like, could we actually do this? Like, is this something we actually want to do? And then here we are a year later. So it was an existing business. It was built in 2019. So it's opened its doors for the first wedding in April of 2019. COVID hit, but we were still, we're middle America, so the venues in rural Oklahoma, so we were able to still do events. We didn't necessarily have to shut down for a very long time. So they were still making money, they were still booking weddings, those kinds of things. The couple that owned it before us was a really young couple, and they kind of built it to what it was. But when we went and viewed it for the first time, when we were looking at it when it was for sale, we knew it had a lot of potential. So there was a lot of things that was just very in a basic, like, hey, we've just survived and got where we're at. And now that the business was starting to build a little bit, we were like, okay, there's room for renovations. There's room for improvement everywhere in the business that I knew that I could take to another level, right? Whether it's social media, website, customer service, just the venue itself with renovations. There was just a lot of potential there. And so we seized the opportunity.
So wait a sec, this is amazing, because first, like, this is your first entrepreneurial venture, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, and not only that, you do it right out of COVID, and okay, I have so many questions. This is amazing though. So really quick though, it's a year this week, right?
It's a year, yeah. It was a year, what was it, last Tuesday or something, like the 20th. So yeah,
Wow.
5 days ago. Mm-hmm.
Wow, so congratulations, that is huge. That's
yeah,
huge.
Exciting.
I'm curious, looking back a year now, are there some things, like, is there anything that jumps out to you that's like, oh my gosh, like if I could have spoken to my, year past self and said, hey, these are some challenges, or these are some, bits of adversity or something that maybe were unexpected, things that you didn't realize might come up that you had to encounter in the last year, the last 365 days of owning this venue? Or even just owning a business. Like, I can't wait to dive into this more.
Yeah, I think owning a business was kind of one of the craziest things. Is just like, okay, we're going all, and my husband quit his job. Like, we were all in. Like,
wow,
we had to make it work, right? So we were like, this is it. I think I'd done a lot of reflecting over the last week, because we did hit kind of that 1 year anniversary of owning it, and we went through a lot of hurdles as far as just like the brides and the couples themselves finding out that their venue's under new ownership, right? They're like, does our contract still stand? Does the pricing still stand? Like, what's happening? What do we do? Like, this is kind of a major thing for the venue for on their side point. So we knew months in advance that we were going to buy it, right? Like, when you're going to buy a business, it's quite a process. And we actually didn't close as soon as we originally intended. We were supposed to close like in July or August. We didn't close until late October. It was a blessing in disguise, really, but I had a lot of work that I did on the back end before even buying the business, that when we actually transitioned, it made it a lot better. And I kind of had a game plan for all of that, as far as communication to the brides and how's it going to work and all these kinds of things. But looking back, I mean, honestly, it's just been kind of a whirlwind of just like taking it all in and just realizing how much we've actually accomplished in the last year. I mean, some of my 3 to 5 year goals we've already accomplished. So it's just kind of crazy for me to be like, where do we go now?
You guys rock. You guys rock. I love that. That is so cool. Well, let's unpack this a little bit, because I have so many questions. Okay, so you don't necessarily have an entrepreneurial background, but it sounds like you saw, like, pretty much immediately there were things you could do. You mentioned social media, customer service, things like that. So did you already have, in that kind of year time period where, your son was, just getting a year old, and were you starting to research things pretty actively and like think about other businesses? Because I mean, a wedding venue, out of all of the businesses that you could have chosen, I know you said your mom and your sister had some of those background things, but was there anything else that kind of specifically spoke to you, or did it just jump out as like, this is kind of a fun thing, like we're helping people get married and have a party? And was it more along that line?
That's exactly it. It was literally something that my husband and I was like, okay, we know we want our own business, we don't know what. And for some reason, this kind of clicked for us. Like, something was telling us that this was the right move. So once we kind of made that decision, of course, I researched the heck out of everything. I ran reports. I was, researching local vendors. I was, researching not only like a business side, but wedding industry. I had never been in the wedding industry, right? It's not like I'm a planner or a coordinator who kind of decided to open a venue. Like, I didn't know anything about the wedding industry, right? Besides my own wedding, which was 6 years ago, and half of it was DIY. So when it came to that, like I had a lot of research to do, but it was something that I found ourselves, like me and my husband, we found ourselves like kind of being really passionate about it. Like we learned to love the industry that we were in, and the business that we took over. So it wasn't something that I knew anything about. It was all like, okay, we're going to do this. This sounds fun. We can do it together, and let's make it what we think it can be.
Were there any resources that you went back to or you kind of consistently referred to, or maybe even people in the industry, podcasts, speakers, coaches, things like that you used early on as part of your journey, or was a lot of it kind of your own self-discovery?
It was all a lot of my self-discovery. I would listen to some podcasts. Obviously, that's kind of how I found you too. And
I was not fishing for that, by the way. I'm just curious, like, because I mean, you're going from like not knowing the industry, and then you got to have a crash course.
So, okay. Honestly, it was every form of research you could do. I did, right? I was Googling. I was on Instagram. I was searching hashtags. I was searching accounts. I was diving, like I would see a post and I would click on all of these different accounts and see all of these different things and contents they're creating and kind of how they were running their businesses. My husband was researching things on the back end as far as like taxes and, like, because we got a loan through the SBA. So all of that kind of stuff we did together. So we were learning not only the wedding industry, but business and entrepreneurship all at the same time.
Simultaneously. So let's go there next. So how did you finance the venue? How did you get into the venue on the financial side? And maybe even if you want to include the process, like did you have to pull any permits that didn't exist or like do anything regulatory?
Yeah. So since it was already an existing wedding venue, we essentially so the building sits on 40 acres of land. So there was two kind of portions to that. There was the business and then there was the building and the land, the property itself. As far as funding, we did have a family investor help us with some of that down payment. But we were able to, obviously we put a lot in that to ourselves as well, but we kind of took it in two. So we actually opened up two businesses at the same time. We have Henry Properties and Henry Holdings is what the business is under. So they're kind of separate entities when you kind of look at it that way.
Property and the business itself. Okay, makes total sense.
Yes. And so then we did we had a broker who was dealing with, the sale of the business, and he connected us to a bank. It's actually not even a local bank, but they work a lot with small businesses and entrepreneurship. And I put together a business plan. And
was that scary?
It was a little scary. Yeah, it was a little scary. I researched, that was kind of the first thing that I started researching was business plans, because I knew I was going to have to kind of get some numbers and sell it and say like what we could do and where we would take it and all these kinds of things. And I just kind of wrote one up. I kind of took a template off online and took it from there and had a call with the bank. And we did have one bank kind of turn us down. It was a local bank that, we knew somebody who banked there or whatever. And they were like, oh yeah, try our bank or whatever. And they're like, no, it's too risky. Like, there's not enough data to support it or whatever. So we got turned down essentially from a first bank. And then the one that our broker referred us to, they ended up saying, yeah, we'll go for it. And we got connected with the SBA. So our loan is through SBA. Got
it. How did you choose the specific location? Because I know you said that it was just like the location went with the business for sale, which is kind of what you were looking for. But were there any hesitations? Because you mentioned it's in a small town, very rural. Were there any concerns in your mind as far as people's willingness to drive or?
Yeah, it still is. It still is in the back of my mind. I still have some people who reach out and say, I'm sorry, it's just too far out. And that's okay. And one thing I've had to kind of learn over the last year of that is people saying no, right? Like it's not going to fit everybody. Your venue is not going to fit every couple. Yeah. And so you have to find your ideal couple and what couples, you work for. And some don't mind it at all. I have couples that come out and say, oh, I love the remoteness of it. And I love that it's just kind of out here and it's so quiet and peaceful. And those couples love it, right? But then I have the couples who are like, well, I don't like the 45-minute drive or the hour drive or whatever. And it's just too far. Or we don't want to pay for, shuttling services or whatever. So you just kind of have to figure out, what it is they're looking for and just kind of tell them that up front.
Got it. So kind of for the couples, fully disclose, hey, we are a little bit further, but, and it kind of helps people probably qualify themselves, right? Because the people who do show up for a tour, if you've
They're
kind
not
of,
surprised. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
it took forever to get here.
yeah, totally. Okay, make 100% sense. So what were some of the first things that you changed about the venue as you came on board?
Right off the bat, I changed social media. The social media, in my opinion, was not strong at all. So I went through and I archived a ton of photos that were on there. A lot of them are stock photos and things like that. So I archived a ton on social media as far as that. And then as well as social media, I went into the account and everything that anybody had tagged us in. I researched all of the photographers that had shot at the wedding previously, because the previous owner was the main photographer for the venue. So all her photos were a lot of what the venue had, but weren't necessarily the best in my opinion. So I was like, I've got to reach out elsewhere. I've got to find some other form of content or I have nothing right now. So I literally went and I found 5 or 6 different photographers that had tagged a photo randomly over the last year or two. And I reached out and I said, hey, I'm the new owner. I'm really looking for some content. I noticed that you shot a wedding here. Do you mind sending me that album? And they did. And that's kind of what I worked off of until I was able to get a hang of, actual. So we transitioned the old owner out of the venue. So they did stay with us. So we closed in October and she technically shot the weddings photos for the end of the year. So this beginning of this year, 2022, was when I was really able to kind of bring in some different content.
Got it. Makes total sense. What was that process like, the transition? Because you kind of alluded to it a little bit at the front. A lot of the couples might have been a little bit nervous, like, oh my gosh, what does this transition mean? At what point did you tell them? Did they, know? Like, give me some of that, because I think for a lot of people who might be thinking about starting a venue, if they're thinking about purchasing a venue, and I know, there are going to be venues for sale, as the economy changes up and down and different things like that. That process, though, it is a very scary thing. It's something we think about in our company. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So if you're a couple getting married at a venue and all of a sudden there's like, oh, new ownership, you're kind of like, what the heck is happening? I think what I did not announce it immediately. And here's the reason why, because the previous owner was a photographer. So if I'm telling the couples that not only is there a new owner, but you also don't have a photographer, they're going to freak out. Yeah. So I left it as quiet as possible. I mean, a couple of them were picking up on some things, and they'd reach out and then I'd kind of call them and explain it to them. But for the most part, my goal initially was I've got to find a photographer to replace the current owner, right? So I found, because they had a lot of packages that included different things and photography was one of them. So what I did is I found a photographer who was local. She didn't have a huge clientele built up yet. She was kind of newer to the city, but she did quality work. And she offered a little bit more than what the previous owner did, as far as like a second shooter, a little bit longer times, a USB keepsake, those kinds of things. And so I kind of reached out to her and I said, hey, I know this is going to sound like a crazy offer, but would you mind shooting the 20-something weddings we already have booked next year? And she was kind of like taken back, like, is this a joke? Like, are you joking with me? Like, you're just giving me 20 weddings worth of, jobs or gigs or whatever you want to call them. And I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm serious. Yeah. I said, I really need somebody. I mean, obviously this is what we'll pay you, and I just ask that you send me the content and you do a good job. And, kind of like got to know her a little bit more to make sure that she kind of matched where we were going with our business, and it worked out perfectly. So once I kind of had that photographer in place, then I felt more comfortable announcing the transition because I could answer a lot more of the questions, right? So I basically sent out a mass email with 10 bullet points. And I said, okay, like, number 1, your contract is not, your contract still stands. Number 2, we're not going to change the prices. We're not going to come in and bump it up and charge you all this money, right? Number 3, I have a photographer for you. She's great. Here's her information. Here's her, reach out to her, all these different things. Here's the thing she offers even more than what you had before, so I really tried to like tell them like, I've got you, I've got your back. Like, I'm here for you. And at first, a lot of them were a little nervous about it, but overall, the response that we have gotten has been like I'm so glad you took over the venue. I don't know what I would have done without you, like all these different things. Like it's honestly turned out to be a blessing in disguise for them too, which is really, humbling and reassuring that, we've been able to provide that comfort for them, even though there was this huge transition in the middle of their engagement.
Yeah, that's wild. That's so cool though. I love hearing that. Tell me a little bit about the venue itself. What are you doing as far as, like insurance, having a planner, how long do couples get access for? In fact, maybe we can start there. What is a package, or if someone wants to get married at your venue, what do they do?
So our
What do they
basic
get?
package, so our basic package is essentially just like a venue rental itself, right? So it's a 14-hour rental, so they get at 10 a.m. to midnight, essentially. They have to be off the property at midnight, so we shut things down around 11 to give them time to pack all their things up and kind of head out. So that's what they get. They get that, and then they get obviously access to pretty much the entire property. We have 2 outside ceremony spaces that offer different vibes, seat the same amount of people, so it doesn't matter what your guest count is. But then we also have the inside reception that also has the prep kitchen, the bathrooms, this bride and groom suite. We have an outdoor fire pit area with games and things like that. So they're getting access to all of that, as well as the tables and chairs. So
Wow.
That's kind of what's in the basic venue rental itself.
And that hour pricing, or that hour time period that you allow them to access the venue, is that set, or did you kind of come up with that arbitrarily, or are there local regulations around that?
Honestly, that's most of what the venues in Oklahoma do. I don't know if that's not a countrywide thing, but we just let them have all day. So they show up in the morning, they unload their cars, setup usually begins, takes 3 or 4 hours because and then the bride kind of goes off and does her own thing, starts getting ready while other people kind of finish all the setup and stuff. And then at that time they have their ceremony, reception and all that. And then they kind of clean up and head out. So that's kind of a normal thing that we do here. I've also offered it to the brides to do like a 9 to 11. So come an hour early, leave an hour early, which I'm okay with because I get to leave a little bit earlier, but that's just kind of something that we've done and it works out really well. There are some venues that do like a 6-hour rental where you like literally come in, set up, get married and leave. And I mean, I understand that for the ones that are trying to squeeze in 2 weddings a day, but in my case, I would just rather have one a day and let them have the time they need.
That makes a lot of sense. What about a planner? Do you require planners?
I don't require planners, but we do offer day of coordination, which is yours truly.
Very cool. Oh, so that's kind of like an add-on that they can do separate price and everything, right?
Yep. They can definitely add on the day of coordination. I mean, definitely more involved with the bride at that point in time, consultation meetings and stuff beforehand. But yeah, we're just kind of the face. Our goal in the venue itself is to create a stress-free kind of one-stop place that they can literally find everything that they need with the resources that they need for all of that for their planning. So we range anything from a venue only all the way to an all-inclusive, meaning the only thing you're going to bring is your alcohol, the things you wear, and a videographer if you want. Everything else is covered, whether it's catering, photography, florals, DJ, cake, all of those kinds of things. So we try to make it easy.
Well, and that's amazing because then you can have a client who wants, a couple who really is passionate about some caterer and they can bring that in or not. And then you can kind of give them the experience your way, the way that, How did you put together those packages and all of those vendors for the all-inclusive side of things?
Mm-hmm. So the previous owners had somewhat of a package already created like that. Obviously, I've tweaked them a little bit. The vendors that were already involved in the packages, I vetted myself. So they've kept them around. It was one of those things though. I was like, if they don't meet my standards, I'm not keeping them. Just because they ultimately represent our venue. So we have to make sure that we align as far as like the customer service we're going to provide, the quality of products we're going to provide, our communication to them. We have to make sure they're all kind of on the same page, or we have to make some hard decisions. But at that point in time, everybody's done really great. And so we kind of picked like a main group of vendors that we thought were really well. And then that's kind of who we work with the most. Well,
I wanted to ask a question really quick about the vendors. Did you have some sort of contract or something like that you used with the vendors? Or was it like, whenever, was it kind of like not an unspoken thing, but like whenever we get an all-inclusive request, we're gonna pass along the information.
Yeah, so it's really a win-win for everybody because we essentially, they don't advertise. Like we bring them a lot of weddings within our packages, right? But in turn, they give us a little bit of a discount. So if you're looking like, say, example for a DJ, right? If you were to book him through his website by himself, he'd probably be around $1,000. We charge $850, right? So there's a discount already there, but then he charges us $650. Okay. So we're giving him a wedding, but we're also making a little bit of money off of that.
Makes total sense. Makes total sense. That's so creative on your guys' end, because what it allows you to do is get the revenue from, bringing on like an all-inclusive package and giving couples the opportunity to take advantage of that service.
Right.
You get to make the money also, but you don't have to kind of bring everything on board, hire a bunch of, people or anything like that. Speaking of hiring,
it has pros and cons, I'll tell you that, because there is a con to it as far as like it's the same people all the time. So when you're like trying to be innovative or bring these like really cool ideas in or whatever, like everybody kind of gets in their comfort zone of the service, the things that they do. So it's really nice to have some of those ones that just get the venue only and really kind of make it their own and bring in these different vendors so we can kind of experience different people. But it's also really great that it makes it really nice for these brides who know that we're getting these great reviews online. They're hearing that these vendors do a good job. They're okay with them just kind of booking a one-stop shop and it all being kind of stress-free. They're not paying deposits to all of these different vendors. They're just paying us. And, we don't upcharge it like crazy amount. Obviously, there's processing fees and all of these things that go into it. But in a nutshell, that's kind of how that works, where it's a really good deal for them because they're not really advertising and we're just handing them weddings. But at the same time, we can kind of get a little share from that because we are advertising for them. And all those kinds of things.
You're driving the business. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Talk to me a bit about the operations. Do you have a team now? Is it, you and your husband who are running it? Are there other people involved? Do you have like venue managers or, who else? What does your team look like?
Yeah. So our team consists of essentially 3 people, myself, my husband, and we do have a venue manager.
Nice.
So she is not quite there all the time by herself. I still do the tours. I still do the consultations because if I'm the planner or the coordinator, I'm dealing with the brides. But she is, she helps clean. She'll help do the chairs. She she's their day of weddings. So she's kind of like an assistant for us too. So she's very involved. And over the last year, we've really developed a relationship with her and kind of trained her to provide the service that we want to provide. And she's been a super helpful asset to the business. So as far as the back end and client facing and all that, that's me. Husband does more of the taxes, the ideas kind of behind the scenes. And then she's obviously there on site and helping a lot with that.
That makes sense. What do you do as far as, leads? Your marketing, because you have to get people in. Obviously, sounds like you're doing the touring and taking the lead, from just being, wherever you're getting them from, to the whole process, booking them. But where do you do your marketing? Are you doing it on Wedding Wire, The Knot, Instagram, Facebook, Google Ads? Like, there's so many different places to go. What are you doing for your marketing?
There's a lot. Our main marketing is Google. And the reason why is because with Facebook, and this is just kind of my 2 cents about it, with Facebook and Instagram, you're just kind of putting things in front of their faces, right? They're scrolling and they're seeing things. My thing with Google is people are actively searching Google, right? Like they are looking for something. If I'm typing in wedding venues in Oklahoma, that's because I'm probably looking for a wedding venue, right? I'm probably getting married. So I feel like our success has been really good from Google because that's what people are looking for. Now, if you're just flashing in front of everybody's faces who might follow you or who might be doing this, or, I've had a lot of like best friends or maid of honors or those kinds of things, like do research for brides, like you're not necessarily targeting the right people, in my opinion. But if somebody's actively searching Google for these specific things, we want to be the one that pops up. And so that's primarily where we use our marketing money is in Google. We've done Facebook and Instagram as well, but we just haven't seen quite of success with it. And then some local markets like Brides of Oklahoma was a big accomplishment we had this year. It's kind of like an elite group that you have to kind of be accepted into. They've kind of seen everything that we've done and the renovations and the service we're providing and invited us to be a part of that. So there's some things like that we're involved in too, but most of our leads are coming from Google.
That's huge. And you're totally right. When people are actively searching, it could be a grandmother, it could be a mom, it could be a relative. But at the end of the day, the person who typed in, wedding venue, wherever it is in the geographic area, they're looking for a wedding venue. You're totally right. Yeah, that's really neat. I've heard mixed reviews on using platforms like Wedding Wire, The Knot. Locally here, there's Here Comes the Guide, Zola. There's all sorts of different ones.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't even dipped my toes in it. And I honestly have not even gone to the website and looked, because we're seeing success with what we're doing right now. And I've heard that it's a hit and miss on those websites, and they can be pretty expensive if you're trying to do it the right way. And so I was just like, why even try to mess with something that's not, why fix it if it's not broken? So,
well, and something that's interesting, the geographic place that you are, I think, really matters, because if you're out in a more remote area, then basically what ends up happening is Wedding Wire or The Knot are going to be pulling from whatever the closest metropolitan areas are potentially, and so they might be driving leads from those places. Leads that are coming through there are going to go, oh gosh, it's a 45-minute drive, or I don't know that I want that. So that makes total sense.
Yeah, we do. As far as the Google search, we do statewide. Our state's not crazy big, so we do statewide. And at first, when we first were like kind of discussing Google ads, my husband was like, well, should we do, statewide? And I was like, well, let's just do like Oklahoma City Metro, right? Like, let's not like be too crazy. But surprisingly, you'd be surprised at how far people travel for their wedding venues. And we get a lot of Tulsa brides, which is an hour and a half to 2 hours away, depending on what side of the city you're on. And so we do statewide, because you just never know where they're going to come from.
That's so interesting. I bet that depends where you're at in the country. Because we've talked to, on this show, we've talked to a lot of different venue owners from different parts of the country. And I know here, distance, I have a venue that we manage, that our company manages, that I get that same thing. And it's like 45 minutes to an hour, maybe even an hour and a half from, an airport. And people are driving out there and like, gosh, this is really far away. And like the distance is the main thing. We do get people from elsewhere, but I think it's more like people are not used to driving maybe as far.
That's true. Like if they're like definitely like city people, them driving 45 minutes outside, not seeing a whole lot on their drive, they're like, where the heck are we going?
We must be in a crazy remote area, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, is this place even going to have running water at this point, or electricity? What's happening?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think definitely people in Oklahoma are used to the scenery that we're in. And I kind of, when brides tend to kind of hint to me that that's an issue, or they're like, well, where do our family and, things stay? Yeah. There is a hotel about 20 minutes away. It's a casino, like a grand resort hotel that's not too far. So that's kind of the main one that I recommend to them, because we've heard good things about it. But I kind of explained to our brides of like, how long are your guests coming in town for your wedding, and what else are they wanting to do while they're here, right? Like, are they literally flying in, going to your wedding, and flying out? Or are they flying in, they're going to stay for 3 or 4 days and kind of make it a vacation and then head out? Because if they're going to stay for a while, put them downtown. It's only 45 minutes away, and there's a lot more for them to do outside of that 12-hour window that they're going to be at your wedding, right? If they're here flying in and then flying out, put them closer to the venue, because that's literally why they're coming. So that's kind of how I explain it to brides of like, what are your guests coming to do? And then that's kind of where I would place them as far as like hotels and driving and things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. And the prioritization of what they know that their guests are going to want to do, and how they're going to stay, and even the relationships, maybe they're going to do more of like an experience.
Right. Like maybe they're hanging out before and after the wedding. I don't know. But yeah. I know like with my wedding, I did have family come in a couple days beforehand. They did, the rehearsal with us, and, we just did different things. So you would want to put them, where all of that activity is, not out in the middle of nowhere.
What about transportation? You kind of read my mind actually on the overnight accommodations, but what about transportation? Do people have usually no problem driving, or do you have relationships with shuttles or the casino maybe?
Yeah, that's the one thing I'm still working on, to be honest with you. So most of them right now, I tell them to carpool if they can, especially like bride and groom. They're going to want to have fun. They're going to want to have a couple drinks, have somebody drive your car or ride with somebody in the morning. But for the guests, most of them are driving themselves. You know, we do have like bartenders and security and stuff like that to kind of monitor, you know, driving and drinking and stuff like that. But I have reached out to that local hotel about shuttling to see, like, it's only 20 minutes. Like, can we work some kind of deal or even getting a discount for our brides? Because I know like a lot of our brides do hotel blocks at that specific hotel. So how can we kind of work together to help each other out with that too? So I've reached out to them a couple of times. I just haven't heard back from them, but that's something that we do need to kind of like sit down and think about, like, how can we better provide that service for our brides? Because I feel like it's the one area that we haven't touched yet. Totally.
Nikole, this is so cool. Like, just hearing about your journey. I have two more questions for you, and it's your favorite part so far, and your least favorite part so far of owning a wedding venue. And I want to know those two. But before that, I just want to say it's so cool to just kind of see the way that you and your husband just jumped into this and got, you know, involved in this. And I think it's tough. Like, any industry is tough. The wedding industry can definitely be tough, but it's super neat to see, you know, you guys just like jumped in, started doing it. You've got a gorgeous website. Instagram is beautiful. Like, I did a little bit of research before, and for anyone who's listening or watching online, like, you can go look in the description. You know, we're going to be blasting out on social media as well. But just like huge kudos to you guys. That's so awesome.
Yeah, got to give some credit too, because I found you originally when I was researching just owning a venue in general, right? Like, where do we start? What happens? I came across the Book More Brides, Kate and Nick story.
Yeah.
And so I was familiar with them from your podcast. And when we got to a point, so my husband and I, where the venue was, right, was we were like, okay, there's potential there. So we did all that we knew how to do on our own of bringing it to the next level. And we're like, okay, I feel like we still need a little bit more, right? Like, I feel like we've done everything that we know as far as our expertise. We need a little bit more of an expert in general in this niche to help us with it. So we did reach out to Book More Brides, and we have been working with them. We currently still are. But as far as the website layout and things like that, they've really helped kind of put the wording on that. And then they've also helped with some of our email templates. I had the base, but then they kind of helped us take it a little bit further. So that was really cool too, because I found them through your podcast, and now we work with them as well.
I love hearing that. That's so cool, because that's literally why we're doing this. So I love hearing that. Thank you.
Yeah, connections everywhere. So
yeah. So tell me, favorite part, best part ever about doing this, and then worst part. You're just like, oh my gosh, like, if I didn't have to do this. Tell me.
Yeah, easy. Favorite part, hands down, our brides. And our couples. We posted a video about this, not too long ago on our social media about just the involvement we have with our couples. And I think, me being the day of coordinator helps that a lot. It's not just, venue category. But they literally text me all the time. I feel like we're friends. They send me pictures of when they pick up their dress, like all of these different things. Like, it's just more like when I booked my venue, we didn't have that. We literally booked our venue and we showed up day of. There was no open house. There was no kind of like helping to plan it. There was no questions and, all of these different things. Excuse me. And so hands down, our couples and just like being there at their wedding day is the best. There's another example where we had a wedding this past weekend, and, when the couple's leaving, we kind of like walk them out and say, congratulations, where are you going on your honeymoon? Just having conversations with them. And we had a DJ that was at our venue that hadn't been there before. And we were saying bye to the couple, and the groom comes up and just gives me this big old hug. And, it says like, thank you so much. It was so beautiful. It was just the best day ever. And we appreciate everything that you guys have done. And of course we're like, yes, this is what we live for. This is why we do what we do. And it was just kind of funny because the DJ was like, now that's saying something when the bride and groom give the venue owners a hug bye when they leave their wedding. And I hadn't really thought of anything of it, but then my husband kind of mentioned, like, did you realize that he kind of said that? Like, that's kind of cool that he, noticed something like that. And I was like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like, to me, it's normal. Like, we just give hugs to everybody. But to somebody looking from the outside in, they're probably like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So that is definitely my favorite part of it, is having that relationship and saying like, yes, that was a successful wedding. They had fun. They enjoyed it. We did everything that we could for them. And it turned out to be everything that they wanted. So
That's so cool.
my favorite part.
That's so cool. Okay, what about the flip side?
The flip side, I think there's kind of two things that go with that. As far as like the physical side, working weddings is obviously a lot. Now, if I'm coordinating and things like that, we're on our feet for 16 hours a day. We're there before they get there and we're there after the party ends. So long hours as far as that. And with kiddos, we have to find babysitters and things like that, which we make it work, but that's definitely a harder side for me. It's just physically just being there, especially if you're having back-to-back weddings and things like that, is tough because your feet hurt. And I have Band-Aids all over my feet from blisters. But that's the hard part. And as far as like the back end of things, what I think affects me the most, which is the hardest, is when somebody cancels and then you're kind of like, okay, well, how do we handle the situation? Because your heart's broken for them because they're going obviously through something, right? If they're calling off their engagement. But at the same time, you're running a business and they signed a contract. And so finding that line of the balance of, I still want to maintain this relationship and I still want to be professional and I still want to show empathy. But at the same time, I got to pay my bills and I got to run my business and I got to, you create these contracts for a reason. And so finding that balance really like pulls at my heart a little bit because it's just hard to handle.
That makes so much sense, and I really hear that the experience, the client experience, is something that's really, really important to you, and that's why they are giving you a hug afterwards, and that's why like that piece is so important. So I can see on the flip side of that how it would be hard when that relationship has to sever. And it's like, oh, how do we do that and still own the business? And so that makes a lot of sense. Well, Nikole, thank you so much for coming on the show today and like just sharing with us your experience and how you did it. It's still so incredible to me. It's so cool that you guys just like picked up, your husband quit his job, you did this venue, literally a year later you get the SBA loan, you get the business plan dialed in, and you go. You made it happen.
Crazy. It's
So,
kind of crazy. Yeah. When you think about it, it's kind of crazy. People maybe call us crazy. I don't know, but we wouldn't be where we're at today if we didn't kind of make that leap, and I'll tell you, we failed a lot getting here. Like this might be like a successful story over the past year, but there has been a lot of like other avenues that we've kind of dipped our toes into and it just didn't work out. And we ended up like losing money because we invested in something and then we didn't like it or didn't have a passion for it like we thought we would. So I don't want people to think that this is like the first time is the best, whatever, because there are things behind the scenes that didn't work out. But as far as like buying a business and truly being an entrepreneurship and buying an existing business that was already making money and running it and trying to take it to where it is, yeah, it's kind of crazy.
If you were giving advice to someone and if you were giving advice to them and saying, hey, I would do what we did over again, I would buy an existing business, or if you were saying start it from scratch, obviously you have experience with buying the existing business. Do you feel like you would do that again if you were going to do a second version of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would do both now. I think there's definitely some things with our venue that I know that I would do different if I built my own, right? Like I would have a bigger kitchen or I would have, all these different little things as far as the venue. As far as buying another venue, I feel like we could definitely do it again and kind of flip it and kind of make it better than what it is. Or we've even talked about other, like a different business adventure altogether. Like, I don't know. I feel like I just have kind of this way of seeing things that could be better within certain areas of them and kind of tweaking that to make it the way it is. Like the website, for example, I built that from scratch from Wix. Like that was not like the website that was there before. The website that was there before, I wouldn't even show you because it just wasn't what it needed to be. But just little things like that. It's like, it's not a whole, and that's something that my husband and I have talked about too, is like, he has a very big passion for kind of like life coaching and these different things. And even when what's been really cool that came out of it was even when we did like announced that we were doing this, how many friends reached out saying, oh, I've been wanting to start a business, or, oh, that's so cool. Like I've been wanting to do this or whatever. And like a handful of people have just reached out of like, well, I'm starting a pop-up coffee bar, or I'm starting my own fake florals, or I'm starting a bounce house company, or I'm starting a boutique. My sister dropped a boutique over the last year, and she was just like all of these little things that people have been able to reach out to. And it's really nice that they even feel comfortable enough to come to us and talk to us about it. So we've even kind of said, do we want to go that route? But lots of different opportunities and fun things.
Yep. Well, it's so cool. It's so cool to see what you guys have built so far. I'm excited to see what's next for you guys and to stay in touch. And thank you so much for being a part of the Venue RX. Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone who's listening, watching online, you can go and check out the description. In the description, there's going to be links to everything, the Instagram, your website, so you can really check out what Nikole, and what's your husband's name?
Ronnie,
very cool. Yeah, so check out what Nikole and Ronnie are up to out there in Oklahoma. And again, thank you for being on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
All right, we'll see you all in the next episode.